Welcome to this presentation about Diamyd Medical, a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focusing on unmet medical needs in diabetes, especially autoimmune diabetes, so type 1 diabetes. My name is Ulf Hannelius. I'm the CEO of Diamyd Medical, and today I will talk about three main highlights about the investment case in Diamyd Medical. So I will talk about that we are addressing an untapped blockbuster market opportunity. We have two disease-modifying first-in-class therapies that are unpartnered, focusing on type 1 diabetes and autoimmune type 2 diabetes. And lastly, I will also talk about our development program that is significantly de-risked due to some very exciting results that we've have disclosed past half year. So we start with the market opportunity. Diabetes is a growing, very large and growing health problem in the world. There's around 463 million people today with diabetes. Out of these, 10% have what's called autoimmune diabetes or type 1 diabetes, and around 15% have a type of type 2 diabetes that is actually called insulin deficient. This is the market segment that we are focusing on, and especially we prioritize autoimmune diabetes, which is the 10%, and that's where we have come the furthest with our drugs. If you look at the market opportunity only for type 1 diabetes, there is a recent health economic project or study that shows that only in the US, type 1 diabetes costs every year about $30 billion. And when you extrapolate that to a global level, it's around $90 billion annually. So it's a really large problem, but obviously that translates into a really large market opportunity. And this same study says that if disease-modifying therapies, so therapies that actually change the course of the disease, have the opportunity to actually benefit the society with billions and billions of dollars in value. So we're talking about a really large market, and most interestingly, this is an untapped market. There are no disease-modifying therapies today on the market that actually change the disease course of type 1 diabetes. We've had insulin for about 100 years now. Nothing else besides insulin and technical devices. So if we then go to our drugs that we are developing, we have two drugs. They are both in clinical development. Our flagship project is called Diamyd. It's what we call the diabetes vaccine Diamyd. It's based on a recombinant protein. What we want to do is reprogram the immune system so that it understands that it shouldn't see this protein as something foreign, rather that it belongs in the body, and in this way reprogram the immune system so it doesn't attack the insulin production in the body. We are in phase 2b clinical development with the results coming in September, so in about 1 month. And we have clinical data already from a significant amount of patients where we, first of all, identified a subgroup of responders, and secondly, we have a new mode of injecting the therapy today that seems to really enhance the efficacy further. We have a second drug in clinical development called Remigen, which is based on a small molecule. Preclinical work here shows that it can regenerate the insulin-producing cells in the body. And we are now in clinical development, and we have already disclosed the first clinical data around this, where we surprisingly actually show that it can reduce hypoglycemic events or actually prevent hypoglycemia, which is an unexpected but very positive outcome, which we are now investigating more closely. There's another clinical study that in the US that showed previously that it has a positive effect on lowering glucagon levels, which is also another hormone in the body, which is elevated in type 1 diabetes, but also in type 2 diabetes. So for both of our clinical drugs in clinical development, we already have clinical proof of concept, and we have exciting data coming shortly. So if you focus a bit more then on the clinical development program and our flagship product, the diabetes vaccine Diamyd, I want to briefly explain why I see that we have a significantly de-risked development program today. Firstly, we have identified responders to the treatment. This is something that was published recently in Diabetologia. It's a scientific journal, the high-impact scientific journal, that is the official journal of the European Association of the Study of Diabetes. They published our research showing that based on more than 500 patients, if you divide those patients into a group of patients that have a certain genotype, so a genetic variation, you can see that these patients get a significant and clinically relevant effect of the vaccine. So this shows us already that we know where the drug works, which de-risks our ongoing program now. We will be able, in the upcoming data coming now in about a month, to look at this subgroup as well to see if we can replicate these results with a new method of injecting the drug. And this is also importantly, there's been parallel to what we have been doing, another publication that came beginning of this year, discussing about the heterogeneity of type 1 diabetes, that we all have to realize that it's a complex disease. You can't expect that one single drug will be able to solve the whole problem. We need to start looking at the heterogeneity, looking at subgroup, and developing drugs that specifically address those subgroups. So what we've done is actually we identified one of those same subgroups that were talked about, that our drug actually works very well in that subgroup. Secondly, as I mentioned, we have a new administration mode of the drug. Our previous studies have focused on subcutaneous injections, so injections under the skin. What we've done now, first in a pilot trial where we could release the top-line results end of last year, we inject directly into a superficial lymph node. And why we do this is because the actual immune reaction happens in the lymph nodes. When you inject underneath the skin, the drug is picked up by immune cells and transported to the lymph nodes. What we are now doing, we are going directly into the lymph node with a much smaller amount of the drug. And based on the pilot trial results that were released end of last year, it looks like this mode of administration significantly enhances the clinical efficacy. So we have both a subgroup that we already identified from previous trials, and now we have a new mode of administering the drug that seems to enhance the effect. Lastly, but which is very important to highlight, is that our drug, the diabetes vaccine Diamyd, has a very good safety profile. And this is especially important in these times with a pandemic ongoing. You don't want to suppress the immune system and risk that the patients get an infection. We are targeting one specific component in the body, no immune suppression. So we really want to develop something that has the best possible efficacy and the best possible safety and convenience for the patients. Given these three highlights, we are obviously also accelerating the development overall in the company. And I especially want to highlight that we've now taken over the manufacturing of the active component in our drug. We're establishing a manufacturing facility in the northern part of Sweden that will set up the manufacturing of the API in diabetes vaccine Diamyd. Here we are both hiring personnel now and building up the labs. And this is also important that we take over the core asset in the company. So we sit on the control of this asset. And like I mentioned, we have results coming in September from the intralymphatic trial. We have already disclosed the results from the pilot trial, which look very, very promising. And we also have a small trial ongoing with a university in Norway in another autoimmune form of diabetes. And for our second drug, I already mentioned, we already have dose escalation results showing surprisingly that we can prevent hypoglycemic events. And this trial is now ongoing in the long-term follow-up, looking at both hypoglycemia, but also the main purpose is to see if we can regenerate insulin-producing cells. And obviously, we have a strong team and we have a growing team. I especially want to highlight here both our founder, Anders Möller, who has, from the very first beginning of the company, had the vision to cure type 1 diabetes. and also Mark Atkinson, who is one of the really top scientists in the world around type 1 diabetes, who joined our board about a year ago. And we are, like I say, we are growing the company. We have production scientists who have joined, facility manager has joined, regulatory affairs officer is joining, and we see that we will hire more people to really strengthen the company here. And I want to end on this slide. Again, we are working with the really top worldwide experts in this area, which we are very proud of, both on the clinical side and the scientific side. And I invite you to visit our webpage where you can read our reports, corporate deck, and read more about the exciting times we are living in now, both regarding type 1 diabetes and our company. Thank you.